Alright, welcome back everyone to another episode of Patch Notes. Except this time it's not in 90 seconds, because if I tried to talk about all this stuff in just 90 seconds, I would miss out on so many important changes. So as you might expect, this week's patch is quite large. There were changes to a lot of class powers, and a lot of companions, and a lot of stuff, okay? We're just gonna start now. So first of all, something a little more general is that you don't need higher armor penetration than normal for Chult and Ravenloft, and this was because of an old buff that was still in place accidentally in Mod 16, so it was removed and now you don't need a crap ton of armor penetration. Okay, now let's get into the classes because I know that's what you all care about. So first of all, we have the Cleric because they are first in the alphabet. So if you were a Cleric and you choose the Arbiter path, the magnitude of Sacred Flame would go down by 5. Whenever you chose Arbiter, and that wasn't intended, so now it doesn't do that anymore. Also, in Arbiter, if you're using the feat Perfect Balance, it actually grants a stack of Radiant Shift when you use Daunting Light now. In that same feat as well, the effects of the Burning Shift and Radiant Shift now last for the intended 60 seconds instead of the 30 that they were lasting for previously. Next up on our class list is the Fighter, starting with Vanguard Fighter, the Tank Paragon. Both changes were for the Shield Thrower feat, so if you were using that, listen up. Previously, it was causing the fighters blocking at wills to generate more threat than intended, and so it doesn't do that anymore. And also, that feat was incorrectly lowering the magnitude of Shield Throw to 150 instead of 250, so now that's been patched up too. Now, onto the Dreadnought Fighter, the DPS version. Commander's Strike now actually benefits from physical damage buffs if those are present, and it now actually states that it increases the target's damage taken by 10% instead of 5%. And that was only a tooltip thing, the power actually was 10% the whole time, it was just sorcery. Another tooltip error, the Heavy Slash at will, stated that the magnitude was 100 and is actually 80. Again, this is nothing that actually changed, just something in the tooltips that was incorrect that was addressed. If you're using the heavier slash feat, it was changed a little bit because before it was doing 2 ticks of damage, one for 280 magnitude and one for 80 magnitude, and now it is just 1 strike for 280 magnitude. So it does a little bit less damage, but it's working intentionally. The Vengeance gauge has indicators for the 25% and 75% indicator lines, which is nice because having visual information on the screen is just a good thing. And lastly, for the Fighter, we have the class feature Momentum. It doesn't require the player to be moving for a bull charge to gain its additional effect. Okay, now on to the Paladino. Radiant Strike at will was renamed to Radiant Slam just because it more accurately describes the attack, and Divine Challenger now actually causes Smite to place the caster at the top of the target's threat list. This is finally fixed, hooray! Lastly for the Paladin is the Oathkeeper Paragon, the Circle of Power encounter. The visual effects were adjusted, and the visual effects don't go away before the effect actually terminates. And just for reference, this is what the new Circle of Power looks like, and it's a little too red for my taste, because if you're in a dungeon, it's very easy to mistake this for an enemy attack because of how red it is. So I really hope that they make it not red, because, you know, that's bad. Now behold as I look menacingly off into the distance. Next up on our list of class changes is the Ranger, which the only really thing that was changed for Ranger is the artifact modification that increases the damage of penetrating arrows and Storm Strike now actually applies its bonus. Now, Warlock. This is a couple of bigger changes, the first being that Lingering Sustain can't heal players who are in a near-death state anymore, so this is similar to the issue that Paladins and Clerics had where you could resurrect people from full dead, except in this case it was the near-death status, but you can't do that anymore. And lastly, Warlock's Bargain cleanses the Warlock instead of only the party members, so you can cleanse yourself with it now, which is a great change, and I'm glad it exists. Now, that is it for the classes, but now let's talk about artifacts for a little bit. A few artifacts were adjusted, and these are the Decanter of Atropal Presence, the Castle Spheres of Annihilation, Sigil of the Warlock, Symbol of Water, and the Taroka deck. The majority of these were just making them work properly or giving the proper stats at certain ranks, but the Taroka deck causes the ghost to summon a ghost for 7 to 15 seconds instead of the 50 or more seconds that it summoned it for previously, so it was nerfed in a way. Now, the Stronghold boon for critical avoidance before only capped at 6,400 stats, whereas the rest of the Stronghold boons cap at 8,000, so with this patch, critical avoidance boon now actually craps? Oh god, I'm too tired for this. Caps at 8,000. Okay, now on to companions. All of these companion changes were making things work properly, and the companions affected are the Owlbear Cub, the Cockatrice, the Renegade Evoker, Manticore, Rust Monster, and Snow Leopard. So all of those bonuses on those companions should now work properly. Moving right along to mounts and insignias, basically only insignia bonuses. The Knight's Defense insignia bonus doesn't deal an occasional 1 damage to you if you have it equipped, because that's kind of weird. It's like, here, have this thing that heals you, but it's also going to hurt you randomly. Okay, and then lastly, Knight's Rebuke now only triggers whenever you receive combat advantage damage. Previously, it was triggering whenever you weren't receiving combat advantage damage, making it more powerful than it should have been. Not that the heals on there are particularly powerful, but, you know, it was more powerful than intended. Okay, now on to the next thing that everyone cares about. The enemies and encounters section, which includes Castle Ravenloft and Lair of the Mad Mage changes. Oh, and the Many Coins Bank Heist. I kind of forget that that skirmish even exists. Sorry. So anyway, in Castle Ravenloft, some adjustments were made to the damage of Strahd's attacks. Basically, almost every single one of his powers had their damage decreased, so all of his sword attacks, his end guard, and the blood flight thing. But to counteract that, the damage dealt by the Sun Sword has also been reduced. However, the devs actually specified in the patch notes that it is still strong, so it must not have been reduced significantly. Also related to the Sun Sword, the magnitude of all of the Sun Sword's powers is now actually displayed on the tooltips, so you can have a look at how much damage you should actually be doing. The healing effect of the Daybreak Sun Sword encounter power has been increased, and the Sunbeam encounter power for the Sun Sword and now actually deals damage for the full length of its charge. Whenever you get taken into Strahd's basement and held by all the shades up above that your friends have to kill to break you out, you know that part. The health of those shades has been reduced, so you should be able to break free of your nightmares sooner rather than later. And then also in that phase, if you are the one in Strahd's basement, the damage dealt by the Executioner's Guillotine is now actually lethal because it wasn't lethal previously, so it should actually kill you again now like it's supposed to. So don't get caught by those guys. Now, in Lair of the Mad Mage, in the Trobriand fight specifically, matching charged players, this is the plus-minus polarity mechanic that's in there. You can now stand as close together as you want without punishment, but you'll still be repelled whenever the effect ends. And the magnetic discharge now only deals damage whenever players of opposing charges collide, and doesn't deal damage based on the other tethered player's offensive ratings, which is how it worked before. And also the distance that the discharge pushes and pulls players has been reduced, but the potency and the duration of the negative condition applied by the magnetic discharge has been increased. So that means that you'll be dealing less damage and taking more damage for a longer duration. So it's important not to get collided with those people. And lastly, in Trobriand's fight, the damage dealt by the electric coils on the floor has been increased, because apparently they weren't shocking enough. Okay, now on to Many Coins Bank Heist. The final boss now has less health, so it should hopefully be much more easily completable now. Okay, there's only a couple things left, one of which is related to Master Expeditions, and that is the rare spawning enemies in there are now immune to crowd control, so yeah. The spawned monsters in the Cabal fight in the Master Spellplague Caverns can now actually aggro on players who are far away in the boss arena. So previously, if you were fighting him and then one of the golems spawned, and they were far enough away from you, they wouldn't aggro from you, and they would just stand there in the lava looking like an idiot. So now they won't do that anymore. Now just a couple of general things that I know a lot of you are going to be happy about. The alabaster weapons have a higher drop chance if you don't already own one, so that means the chances of you getting a duplicate are either the same or lower, but if you have not gotten any of them before, you have a higher chance to get one. The Spies Guild shirt and pants are now actually in the Seal of the Mountain store finally, so you can actually buy those now. The crafted offhand daggers and dual blades now properly have weapon damage values, which is a good thing because not having weapon damage values on a weapon is kinda silly. And the artifact necklaces that gave the incorrectly functioning AP gain have been changed to give Constitution for increased AP gain and max health. And almost last, the Quartermaster enchantment rewards are now actually granted appropriate to the equipped tier of the enchantment, so that means that the higher tier of enchantment you have, the better chances of better rewards that you have. And now, second to last, the Hellfire Engine mount has a higher camera, so it's not taking up like 90% of your field of view, which is good because you usually need to see whenever you're driving somewhere. And now last but certainly not least, some of the successor gear set bonuses have been updated. The feet, arms, and body slots were updated. The body slot now provides 0.5% defense to a maximum of 6%. The arm slot increases your power by 5% while active, and the feet slot increases your combat advantage by 5% while active, and that will actually be helpful for those of you who are having trouble capping your combat advantage. Okay, I lied about that being the last thing. There's one more thing that was mixed in with all that, and that is the Terminus Expedition Companion Gear Piece can now actually drop from Master Expedition, so if you missed that one, you do still have a chance to get it that way. Alright, that's finally everything. Hopefully this video is not longer than like 6 minutes, but I get the feeling that it's gonna be longer than that. So anyway, sorry for dragging it out too long, and also for being late. I was sleeping last night whenever the patch notes were released for today, so didn't have the opportunity to make that yesterday. So thank you guys for listening. I'm assuming you didn't watch because my fancy unicorn stick pony is not that entertaining. But thank you, and I will see you next time. Bye.